There is a monument standing in the desert right now that has been there for 4,600 years. It has survived empires, floods, plagues, and wars. It has outlasted every religion that existed when it was built. It is the oldest of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the only one still standing. And you helped build it. That is what tonight is about. Not the Pharaoh, not the priests, not the architects with their papyrus scrolls and their measuring ropes. Tonight, we follow the man whose name was never written down. The man who woke before sunrise in a camp at the edge of the desert, ate bread that tasted of sand, picked up a copper chisel, and walked toward the stone. Here is something that will change how you see those pyramids forever. The people who built them were not slaves. Let that land for a moment. For centuries, literally centuries, historians assumed the pyramids were built by slaves driven by whips and fear. It is one of the most persistent myths in all of human history. The reality, confirmed by archaeological evidence discovered in the 1990s, is far stranger and more interesting. The pyramid builders were paid workers. They received wages. They had health care. They were buried with honor near the pyramids they built. And the man who built the Great Pyramid, the man you are tonight, was not a slave. He was something more complicated than that. Settle in. Let the noise of the day begin to fade, and let us travel back to the banks of the Nile, to the year 2560 BC, to the greatest construction project in human history, and to the ordinary man at the center of it. But before we begin, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It truly means the world, and it helps others who love history find this channel. And I always want to know, where in the world are you tonight? What time is it where you are? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And now, the desert is waiting. You are not a pharaoh. You are a man in your mid-20s, born in a village in the Nile Delta. A flat, green, muddy place where the great river splits into fingers before it reaches the sea. Your father was a farmer. His father was a farmer. His father before him was a farmer. It is the year 2560 BC, the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, the man the Greeks will one day call Cheops, is at its height. And the pyramid being built on the plateau at Giza is the largest structure ever attempted by human hands. You are one of approximately 20,000 workers currently engaged in building it. Here is a number that is almost impossible to comprehend. The Great Pyramid contains an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks. The average block weighs about 2.5 tons, roughly the weight of a small car. Some of the granite blocks used in the interior chambers weigh 80 tons each, heavier than a fully loaded semi-truck, quarried 400 miles away and floated down the Nile on wooden barges. You did not choose this work exactly, but you did not resist it either. Every year, when the Nile floods, a season called Akhet, lasting from June to September, the fields of Egypt disappear under brown water. Farming becomes impossible, and the state, the machinery of the pharaoh's kingdom, reaches into every village and conscripts workers for the building projects. This is called corvée labor, a system where ordinary citizens owe a portion of their time to the state in lieu of taxes. You have known since childhood that when the flood comes, you will go to Giza, not as a slave, not in chains, but because it is your obligation as a citizen of Egypt, and because, if you are being honest with yourself, the wages and the food are better than what your father's farm provides. The food alone is extraordinary by the standards of your village. Every day, workers at Giza receive rations of bread, 10 loaves per man, plus dried fish, onions, garlic, and a daily allowance of beer. Not the strong beer of a festival, but a thick, nutritious, slightly sour liquid made from fermented bread, closer to a liquid meal than a drink. It provides calories and keeps the water from making you sick. Archaeologists excavating the workers' village at Giza found evidence that the workers consumed enormous quantities of beef, sheep, and goat. The cattle alone required a herd of thousands of animals to sustain the workforce. The pyramid builders, the evidence shows, ate better than most Egyptians, better almost certainly than the farmers back in your village. This is the strange paradox of your life. The hardest work you have ever done is also the best fed you have ever been. Your home for the duration of the flood season is a workers' village built specifically for the project. It sits on the plateau at the edge of the desert, close enough to the pyramid that you can see it from the doorway of your barracks. The settlement has a bakery, a brewery, a medical facility, workshops for carpenters and coppersmiths, and long rows of sleeping quarters made from mud brick. The sleeping quarters are simple: a mud brick bench raised off the ground, a reed mat, a coarse linen sheet. There is no privacy and there is no silence. You sleep alongside perhaps 50 other men in a single long room, their breathing and turning and occasional shouted dreams surrounding you through the night. The smell of sweat and stone dust and beer is constant. But there is something else too. Something that surprises you every season, no matter how many times you have come here. A sense, difficult to name, that this place is serious. That the work happening here is not ordinary work. You grew up watching the pyramid rise from across the delta. Every year it was higher. Every year it was closer to the sky. You have heard the priests say that when it is complete, the Pharaoh's soul will travel along its smooth face to the stars. You do not fully understand the theology, but you understand the scale. And you understand that you are part of something that will outlast everything you know, including you. Your days begin before sunrise. The foreman, a man named Nebweneneth, broad and scarred, with the permanent squint of a man who has spent 20 years looking into desert light, walks through the sleeping quarters at the first grey of dawn, striking a wooden clapper against the wall. There is no gentle waking here. You rise immediately, or you answer to Nebweneneth. And answering to Nebweneneth is an experience nobody repeats voluntarily. You dress quickly, a simple linen kilt, sandals made of plaited reed, a strip of linen wrapped around your head to protect against the sun. You splash water on your face from a clay pot beside the door. You eat standing up, 2 loaves of bread, a handful of dried onion, a cup of beer that is still slightly warm from the fermentation jars. It takes 4 minutes. Then you walk. The walk to the pyramid takes about 15 minutes at a good pace. You have made this walk hundreds of times. In the early dark, with the stars still visible and the air still cool. It is almost pleasant. The sound of 2,000 other men walking with you, sandals on stone, low voices, the occasional cough, creates a rhythmic sound that you have come to associate with the beginning of the day. A kind of percussion that is neither music nor speech, but something between. By the time you arrive at your station, the sky is beginning to lighten in the east over the Nile. The pyramid is directly in front of you, and at this angle, in this light, it does not look like something men built. It looks like a geological formation, a mountain that grew from the desert floor according to laws you do not understand. Then Nebuchadnezzar shouts, and it is just stone again. Your specific job, the job you have been assigned for the past 3 flood seasons, is hauling. You are part of a gang of 20 men who move limestone blocks from the ramp to their designated position on the pyramid face. The blocks weigh between 2 and 3 tons each. They sit on wooden sledges. Your gang pulls the sledge using ropes of twisted papyrus fiber, thick as your forearm, while other workers pour water on the surface ahead of the sledge to reduce friction. This has been established by modern physics as an effective technique. Wet sand has about half the friction of dry sand, and physicists have calculated that a gang of 20 men pulling steadily can move a 2-ton block at a rate of about a foot per second on a wet surface. You do not know about physics. You know that when the water crews keep ahead of you, the sledge moves smoothly and your muscles ache in a manageable way. When they fall behind, the sledge grinds and the ropes bite, and by the end of the day, you cannot close your hands. The work is monotonous in a way that is almost hypnotic. Pull, step, pull, step. The rope bites into your palms. Your feet find a rhythm with the 19 other men around you. There is a work chant, a low rhythmic vocalization that your gang makes together, not quite singing, more like a collective breath set to tempo. It helps. It keeps the pull synchronized. It keeps your mind from thinking too hard about how far you still have to go. Here is something about physical labor that people who have never done it for 12 hours do not understand. After the first hour, the pain becomes background. After the third hour, the background becomes normal. After the 6th hour, you enter a state that is not quite thought and not quite dream, a moving meditation where your body continues its work and your mind floats somewhere above it, attached only loosely to the rope in your hands and the man's back in front of you. It is, in its strange way, peaceful. You will not remember most of today. You will remember the morning's coolness and the moment at midday when the foreman calls a rest and you collapse in the narrow shadow of a finished section of wall, and the taste of the water that a boy brings around in clay jugs, and the singular pleasure of lying flat on stone that is cooler than the air above it. By mid-afternoon, when the sun is at its worst, the pace slows. Even Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges the heat. Work does not stop. It never fully stops, but it becomes less frantic. Blocks that require precise positioning are moved carefully. Measurements are checked against the architect's knotted ropes and plumb bobs. Errors in a pyramid this size are not correctable. Every block placed wrong means every block after it is also wrong. The precision required is, in its own way, as impressive as the scale. The base of the Great Pyramid covers 13 acres, and its four sides differ in length by less than 8 inches. The corners are aligned to the cardinal points, north, south, east, west, with an accuracy of less than 1/10 of a degree. This was achieved without compasses, without GPS, without any instrument more sophisticated than a plumb line and a sighting rod. The men who achieved this accuracy were not priests or scholars. They were surveyors, practical men with practical tools who had spent their careers measuring land and water levels. They understood geometry not as a philosophy, but as a daily necessity. And what they built stands, 4,500 years later, within fractions of an inch of their original calculations. You do not think about any of this while you are hauling. You think about the rope. You think about your feet. You think about whether tonight's bread will be warm or cold. But sometimes, in the evening, when the light is low and the pyramid catches the last of the sun and turns the color of heated copper, you stop and look at it, and you feel something that you do not have a word for. Something between pride and fear and wonder. Something like, I was here. I put my hands on this. Act 2. The World of Egypt, 1500 to 2700. To understand the world you live in, you need to understand one thing above all others. The Nile is not just a river. The Nile is Egypt. The Nile is life itself. Every year, without fail, the river floods. It rises from its banks and spreads across the desert floor, depositing a layer of black silt so fertile that anything planted in it grows as if touched by divine hands. When the flood recedes, the fields emerge dark and wet and ready. This is why Egypt is possible at all. Why a civilization of this complexity can exist in the middle of what would otherwise be barren desert. The Nile gives, and Egypt receives. And the transaction has been running so long and so reliably that it feels like a law of nature rather than a geographical accident. Your entire calendar is organized around the Nile. The year has 3 seasons. Akhet, the flood, when you are here at Giza. Peret, the growing season, when you return to your village and plant. Shemu, the harvest, when you gather what you planted and pay your grain taxes to the state. This cycle has been repeating for longer than anyone can remember. It will repeat, as far as you know, forever. Within this world, the Pharaoh is not merely a king, he is a god, specifically the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon-headed deity who rules the sky. When he dies, he will become Osiris, king of the dead. His successor will become the new Horus. This is not metaphor or propaganda. It is the cosmological operating system of your civilization. The pyramid is not a tomb in the way a modern person might understand a tomb. It is a machine for transformation, a device by which the pharaoh's soul, his ka and his ba, the 2 components of the self that survive death, can make the journey to join the imperishable stars in the northern sky. The pyramid's precise alignment to the cardinal points, the shafts aimed at specific stars, the elaborate rituals performed in the mortuary temple at its base. All of this is engineering in service of a single purpose: to ensure that Khufu completes his journey and becomes a god. And here is what makes this relevant to you, hauling stones in the heat. You believe it. Not as a metaphor, not as a story told to keep the workers compliant. You genuinely believe that when this pyramid is finished, your pharaoh will ascend to the sky, and that Egypt will continue to be protected by his divine presence, and that the Nile will continue to flood, and that your children will continue to eat. The pyramid is, in your understanding, not just a monument to one man. It is a guarantee of the world's continuation. This is why 20,000 people haul stone through the summer heat. Not because they are forced, because they believe. Your gang has a name. Most gangs do. Names assigned by the foreman or chosen by the men themselves, painted on the stones they place so that future inspectors can trace which gang was responsible for which section of the pyramid. Your gang is called the Friends of Khufu. Another gang working nearby calls themselves the Drunkards of Menkaura, named after a previous pharaoh. A third gang, assigned to the most difficult interior work, calls themselves simply the Endurance. These names matter. The gang is your primary social unit at Giza. You eat with your gang, sleep in the same room as your gang, and on the 4 days per month that are designated as rest days, you spend most of your time with your gang. Arguments get settled within the gang. Favors are traded within the gang. The limited contraband available on the plateau, extra beer, better cuts of meat, the occasional game of chance, flows through gang networks. Nebwenenef, for all his hard edges, is a fair foreman. He distributes the rations without favoritism. When a man in your gang injured his back 3 seasons ago, a serious thing when your body is your only tool, Nebwenenef arranged for him to be assigned lighter duties rather than sending him home without wages. This is not universal. You have heard of foremen who keep the best rations for themselves, who punish minor infractions with public beatings. But Nebwenenef runs a clean operation, and the Friends of Khufu have lower rates of injury than most gangs on the plateau. On rest days, the plateau transforms. The grinding sound of sledges and the rhythmic chanting of work gangs gives way to something more human. Men play board games called Senet and Mehen in the dust outside the barracks. Musicians, there are always musicians in a crowd of 20,000, pull out hand drums and reed flutes and play the old songs from the Delta villages. Some men pray at the small shrines erected near the workers' settlement, making offerings to Ptah, the god of craftsmen, whose protection is particularly valued here. Some men write letters home. Most of the workers are not literate themselves. Literacy in Egypt is a specialized skill, belonging to the scribal class. But there are scribes available at Giza who will write a letter for a small payment. You have sent 3 letters home this season. 1 to your wife, 1 to your father, 1 to your older brother, who broke his leg last spring and cannot work, asking how he is healing. The replies come back slowly, carried by messengers who travel the road between Giza and the Delta. Your wife's last letter told you that your daughter has learned to walk, that the onion crop was better than expected, that the cat you brought home 2 years ago has had 4 kittens, and your daughter calls each one by a name she invented herself and refuses to explain. You have read this letter 6 times. It is kept folded inside your sandal against the sole of your foot, where it will not get lost or damaged. You miss her more than you can explain to the men around you. Missing someone here, in this place of enormous effort and masculine noise, feels like a private weakness. You keep it to yourself. But at night, when the barracks is dark and the breathing of 50 men fills the room, you think about the weight of a child sitting on your lap, and the particular smell of river mud and cooking smoke that your house carries in the evenings, and the exact sound of your wife's laugh. And you count the days until the flood recedes, and the foreman releases you. Act 2 continued. The work in detail. 2700 to 4000. Not all work at Giza is hauling. The pyramid construction requires an extraordinary range of skills working simultaneously. There are quarrymen who cut the limestone blocks from the bedrock of the plateau itself. The vast majority of the pyramid is made from locally quarried stone, which is why there is a significant depression in the plateau near the pyramid, the ancient quarry still visible today. There are ramp builders who construct and maintain the earthen ramps along which the sledges travel. There are water carriers whose only job is to keep the surface ahead of the sledges wet. There are rope makers, sledge repairmen, copper tool sharpeners, bakers, brewers, doctors, and scribes. And then there are the finishers, the men who smooth the outer casing stones. These are not your gang's work. The outer casing is made from fine, white Tura limestone, quarried from hills on the opposite bank of the Nile, and chosen for its exceptional whiteness and smoothness. When the pyramid is complete, it will be sheathed in this white stone from base to apex, polished to a finish that in bright sunlight will make it glow like a second sun. You have seen the finished sections near the base, and the effect is startling. Something between stone and light, hard and brilliant simultaneously. The men who dress these casing stones work with copper chisels and dolerite pounding stones, removing material in layers thinner than a fingernail, checking their work constantly against string lines and plumb bobs. It is slow, precise, maddening work. A single casing stone takes days to finish. A man who rushes it produces a surface with visible joints, a humiliation in this context, where every stone must fit against its neighbour so precisely that not even a sheet of papyrus can be slid between them. You have stood and watched the finishers work, on rest days when their section is visible and there is nothing else to do. There is a man whose name you do not know, older than you, with forearms like ropes and a habit of working with his eyes half closed, as if listening to the stone, who produces surfaces so flat that they seem to deny the reality of the material. You do not envy his patience, but you respect it in the way you respect all genuine skill. The mathematics underlying the pyramid's construction are handled entirely by the royal architects and their team of scribes. You do not need to understand them to do your work, just as a man who carries bricks does not need to understand structural engineering. But you have listened to the scribes talk, on those evenings when they sit near the workers' area after their own day's work. And you understand that the pyramid is being built to a ratio, a specific relationship between its height and the length of its base, that the architects call the sekhed, and that this ratio is the same ratio that appears in the shape of certain natural formations, and that this is not coincidence. You do not fully understand what this means, but you find it interesting, in the way that certain things are interesting when you are tired and lying on your back looking at the stars. Not intellectually interesting, not something you could explain, but interesting in the way that the universe sometimes produces a sensation of fitting together correctly. The accidents are real. In 3 seasons of work at Giza, you have seen 7 men die. 1 crushed by a block that shifted on its sledge when a rope broke. 2 killed in a collapse of an interior passage before the supports were properly set. 1 taken by infection after a copper chisel slipped and opened a deep wound in his hand. 3 others in ways you do not want to remember clearly. The medical facility at Giza is real. Archaeologists have found the remains of a surgeon's workshop near the workers' village, with evidence of sophisticated medical practice for its time. Broken bones are set with wooden splints. Wounds are treated with honey, which is, in fact, an effective antimicrobial, as modern medicine has confirmed, and covered with linen bandages. The surgeons can amputate a limb cleanly when infection demands it. They cannot do much about internal injuries. When a man dies at Giza, he is buried in the workers' cemetery near the pyramid. This is not a cursory burial. The graves contain pottery, food offerings, small amulets, the equipment believed necessary for the journey to the afterlife. The bodies are interred facing west, toward the land of the dead. The cemetery has been excavated by modern archaeologists, and the conclusion is clear. These were honored burials. The people who built the pyramid cared about what happened to the people who built the pyramid. You know the man who was crushed by the block? His name was Amenhotep. He was from a village 3 days' walk north of yours. He had a way of laughing, a sudden surprise sound, as if laughter always caught him off guard, that you still hear sometimes in the noise of the working day, and then realize is not there. You do not speak about this to the other men. Death is common in this world, but absence is its own kind of weight. Act 3. The weight of the stone. 40 minutes to 56 minutes. There is a day, about 6 weeks into your current season, that you will remember for the rest of your life. It begins normally. The dawn walk, the bread and beer, the chanting of the work gangs as they move into position. Your gang is assigned a particularly large block today, one of the limestone courses near the 100th layer of the pyramid, which means the ramp is steep and the footing difficult, and the distance back down for the empty sledge takes nearly as long as the ascent. By mid-morning, you have made 3 runs. Your hands are bleeding where the rope has rubbed through the calluses. Your lower back has the particular deep ache of sustained heavy pulling. Not sharp, not alarming, just a grinding reminder that you are asking your body for something it was designed to do, but was not designed to do indefinitely. On the 4th run, something happens. The rope on the right side of the sledge snaps, a sound like a crack of bone. It happens instantly. One moment, 20 men are pulling in unison. The next, there is a sound like a cracked bone, and the right side of the sledge drops, and the block shifts, and the man directly behind you on the right rope, a young man named Ka, 17 years old, first season at Giza, son of a potter from the Fayum, does not get out of the way in time. The block does not kill him, but it pins his left foot against the limestone surface of the ramp, and by the time 3 men lift the corner of the sledge enough for him to pull free, his foot is destroyed. The surgeon will save his life. He will walk again after a fashion, with a stick. He will never return to Giza. You stand at the side of the ramp for a long moment after they carry Ka down. The other men of your gang are already working to splice the rope, to check the sledge, to prepare for the next run. This is how it works here. The work does not pause for long. But you stand there for a moment longer than the others, and you look at the pyramid. It is enormous. From this angle, 100 layers up, you can see the whole plateau below you. The quarry, the workers' village, the road leading down to the Nile, the river itself glinting in the distance. And above you, the pyramid continues for another 130 layers, rising to the apex that is not yet finished, into a sky so blue and so deep that it seems like a different kind of stone. You think about Ka. You think about Amenhotep. You think about the letter in your sandal, and your daughter learning to walk, and your wife's laugh, and the cat with the 4 kittens whose names you still do not know. And here is a question that I want you to sit with tonight. The same question you are sitting with on that ramp in 2560 BC. A question that has no comfortable answer. Is this worth it? Not philosophically, not abstractly, but specifically, actually, personally. Is building this thing worth the cost of Ka's foot? Worth Amenhotep's life? Worth your aching hands and your absent seasons and the weight you carry every day in the form of all the days you are not home? You do not answer the question. Not on the ramp, not that evening, not in the weeks that follow. You return to work. You haul the next block and the block after that. You send another letter home. You sleep in the barracks surrounded by 50 breathing men. But the question stays with you. In the way that certain questions do, not painful exactly, more like a stone in your sandal that you become so accustomed to you stop noticing it most of the time, until some angle of light or some moment of stillness brings it back with complete clarity. The pyramid asks this question of everyone who touches it. It has been asking it for 4,500 years. The answer changes depending on who you ask and when you ask them, and what they have already lost. But the pyramid does not wait for an answer. It simply rises. The months pass. The flood season moves toward its end. The Nile begins to recede, leaving behind its annual gift of black silt on the fields. The air cools slightly. Not comfortable, not by the standard of where you come from, but noticeably less murderous than August. The work continues at its relentless pace. You have now placed, directly or indirectly, approximately 300 stone blocks into the body of the pyramid. You know this because your gang keeps count, a point of pride, a subject of competition with the other gangs. 300 blocks, each weighing more than your father's house. 300 blocks that will sit in this precise configuration for longer than any civilization currently alive on Earth will last. Nobody tells you this. You would not understand it if they did. But on some wordless level, you know it. You know it the way you know the Nile will flood, not as information but as a felt reality, something in the body rather than the mind. You put your hands on stone that will outlast everything. And somehow, that is enough. Act 3 continued. Gods and Stars. 50 minutes to 60 minutes. The Egyptian understanding of death is not what you might expect. Death in your world is not an ending. It is a transformation, a passage from one mode of existence to another. The dead do not disappear, they continue. They require food and drink left by the living at their tomb entrances. They can be called upon in times of difficulty through letters addressed to them, placed in their tombs. They can cause problems if neglected or disrespected. The dead are present. They are part of the ongoing fabric of your world. The gods are also present, not abstract, not distant, not concerned only with large cosmic events. The gods of Egypt are local, specific, practical. Ptah watches over craftsmen and builders. Bes, a strange dwarf-like figure, protects households and pregnant women. Taweret, shaped like a hippopotamus standing upright, is the patron of childbirth. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing and calculation, is the god most important to the architects and surveyors of the pyramid. You make daily offerings at the small shrine near your sleeping quarters. A few drops of beer, a pinch of bread, a word of respect to the gods relevant to your work. This is not a formal religious practice. It is what you do, the way you breathe. The boundary between the sacred and the ordinary in your world is so thin as to be effectively non-existent. Ra, the sun god, is above all others at this moment in Egyptian history. His daily journey across the sky, rising in the east, crossing the sky in his solar boat, descending in the west to travel through the underworld during the night, battling the serpent Apep who tries to devour him, and rising again in the east, is the fundamental rhythm of existence. Every sunrise is a victory. Every day is a gift that was not guaranteed. The pyramid points at stars, specifically the circumpolar stars, the stars that never set, that circle the pole of the sky through the night and are always visible. In Egyptian cosmology, these are the imperishable stars, the realm of the transformed dead, the destination of the pharaoh's soul. The shafts inside the pyramid, narrow channels cut through hundreds of feet of solid limestone, are aimed at specific stars. Orion's belt, Thuban, others. They are not ventilation shafts. They are corridors for the soul. You did not build those shafts. That work was done by specialized teams of stonecutters working in the deep interior, an environment so dark and confined that the workers had to carry their own oil lamps and chisel by feel. But you know the shafts exist. You have heard the architects discuss them. You understand approximately their purpose. And at night, lying on your sleeping mat, you sometimes look up through the small opening in the barracks roof at the stars visible through it. The same stars the pyramid is aimed at, and you feel the two things connect in your mind. The stone you hauled today, the star directly overhead, the pharaoh's journey that will begin when the last block is placed and the final rituals are performed. It is a long chain of cause and effect, stretching from your bleeding hands to eternity. You fall asleep looking at it. Act 4. Return and Legacy. 60 minutes to 72 minutes. The day the foreman releases you is the best day of the year. There is no ceremony. Nebuenenef simply walks through the barracks in the last week of September, when the flood has fully receded, and the fields are emerging dark and ready, and tells each gang that their work is complete for this season. Final rations are distributed. Wages, copper rings, Deben weights, grain credits are settled. A few words are exchanged, not warm exactly, but not cold either. The language of men who have worked hard together and know each other's limits. You pack what you brought, which is not much. The letter from your wife, now worn soft from rereading. A small carved amulet of Bess that your father gave you the first year you came to Giza, which you touch every morning before work. A copper chisel that Nebuenenef presented to you last season as recognition for consistent work. A genuine honour, since copper is valuable. The walk back to the delta takes 3 days. You travel with 4 other men from your gang, who come from villages near yours. You walk in the morning, rest in the afternoon heat, walk again in the cooler evening hours. You sleep beside the road, wrapped in your linen sheet, looking at the stars that the pyramid is aimed at. The conversations on this walk are different from the conversations at Giza. At Giza, the talk is practical, work talk, complaint talk, the small politics of the barracks. On the road home, something opens up. Men who have worked side by side for months without speaking about anything other than the next block suddenly talk about their children, their parents, their fears and their hopes, the things they have been keeping folded up inside them all season. You tell a man named Uzahat, who is from a village 2 hours north of yours and has a daughter the same age as your daughter, about the letter in your sandal. He tells you about a promise he made to his son before leaving, that he would bring back a toy, something made at Giza, something the boy could show his friends. He spent his last rest day carving a small ox from a scrap of limestone. He pulls it from his belt pouch and shows it to you. It is roughly shaped but unmistakable. His son will understand. You arrive at your village at dusk on the 3rd day. Your wife is in the doorway. Your daughter does not recognize you at first. You have been gone since June, which is a significant portion of her short life, and you look different after a season at Giza, harder and darker and thinner. She watches you from behind her mother's leg with serious eyes. Then you crouch down and hold out your hand, and she recognizes something, your voice or your smell, or the specific quality of your stillness, and she comes to you. You pick her up, and she is heavier than when you left. And you stand there in the doorway of your house, with your daughter in your arms, and your wife's hand on your back, and the smell of cooking and river mud and home surrounding you. And you do not think about the pyramid at all. For a while. You will go back next year. You already know this. The flood will come, and Nebuenenef will send word, and you will pack your sandals and your amulet and your chisel, and walk back to Giza. You will do this for another 8 or 10 years, until your back gives out, or the pyramid is finished, or you are assigned to a different project. The Great Pyramid will be completed around 2540 BC, 20 years from where you are now. You will be there for most of those 20 years. You will see the final casing stones placed. You will see the pyramid in its completed form, sheathed in white Tura limestone, polished smooth, gleaming in the desert sun like something that fell from the sky rather than something men built from the ground up. You will stand at a distance and look at it, and it will not look like the thing you built. It will look like the thing you built became. And somewhere in that difference, between the stone you hauled and the monument it became, is the entire story of what it means to be human. To do small things with your hands, daily, painfully, without the ability to see the whole, in service of something larger than you can understand. The pyramid has now been standing for 4,600 years. The white casing stones are gone, stripped in the medieval period to build mosques and fortresses in Cairo, but the core remains. 2.5 million blocks of limestone, stacked with a precision that modern engineers still study and debate, rising to a height of 481 feet above the Giza plateau. The Pharaoh Khufu, whose soul this machine was built to transport, is known to history primarily through his pyramid. His mummified remains have never been found. His life is imperfectly understood. But his pyramid stands. And the workers who built it, whose names were found scratched on the stones they placed, names like the Friends of Khufu and the Drunkards of Menkaure, are known now too. Their village has been excavated. Their bakeries and breweries and medical facilities and cemeteries have been mapped. Their bones have been studied. Their graffiti has been read. They were not slaves. They were workers. They ate well and they were paid, and they were buried with honor. And they built something that has outlasted everything they knew. The hieroglyphic writing system that recorded their names, that recorded everything in ancient Egypt, was deciphered by Jean-François Champollion in 1822 using the Rosetta Stone. The Rosetta Stone was discovered in 1799 by French soldiers during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign. Napoleon himself visited the pyramids and, according to accounts of uncertain reliability, spent a night alone inside the Great Pyramid and emerged pale and shaken and refused to speak about what he had seen or felt. We do not know what he experienced. We do not know if the story is even true. But we know what you experienced. The rope in your hands, the stone moving forward, the chant of the men around you, the letter folded against the sole of your foot, the question on the ramp, unanswered, settling slowly into acceptance. The pyramid does not explain itself. It simply stands. 7200 to 7500. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey into the ancient world. From a mud brick barracks at the edge of the desert to the chanting of a work gang in the early morning dark, to the smell of bread and beer and river mud that was the smell of daily life in Egypt 4,500 years ago, we have walked, for a little while, in the sandals of someone whose name we do not know, whose face we cannot picture, but whose hands touched something that still stands. The desert is still there. The pyramid is still there. The stars it was aimed at are still there, turning overhead in the same slow circles They have been turning since before there were human eyes to watch them. I hope wherever you are tonight, whatever the hour, whatever is pressing on you from the day, this has been good company for the quiet hours. If this journey meant something to you, please consider subscribing and leaving a comment. I read every one, and they carry me through the work of making the next one. Sleep well. We will travel again soon.